Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the Iron Fist, Danny Rand, the Early Years Omnibus from Marvel Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before getting started, I want to give a huge thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advanced copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on January 30th. And what we're looking at here is the direct market cover. This is the one that's supplied by Dave Cockrum. On the left-hand side is your standard edition cover, and that one is supplied by Gil Kane. Now, the standard edition cover is available everywhere, whereas the direct market cover is only available at places like cheapgraphicnovels.com or waltzcomicshop.com, comicsbugle.com, readscomics.com, Dying Breed Collectors, bdcosmos.com, organicpricebooks.com, instocktrades.com, Tales of Wonder, and DCBS, places like that. But everything underneath the dust jacket is the same. So what we're looking at here is the fight with Sabretooth in the penultimate issue of Iron Fist. So why this omnibus? We only have two, right? We have this omnibus and the Fraction Ed Brubaker omnibus. Well, it's to celebrate 50 years of Iron Fist. That's right, 50 years. 1974 is when all of it started. But here's the cover again, supplied by Dave Cockrum. And the spine of the book, the Marvel Omnibus logo, Iron Fist, Danny Rand, The Early Years. Claremont, Mensch, Isabella, Byrne, Nebres, and Hama. And then down here is this image of Danny, the Iron Fist. The complete early adventures of Danny Rand, Iron Fist in one immortal omnibus. Mature content. I'll explain why here in a little bit. Price $125. Now, this stuff in here has been collected previously in this particular Epic collection. There's also two Marvel Masterworks, but this has a lot more than the two Masterworks and the Epic collection, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. So let's first take a look underneath the dust jacket and the flaps like unto a thing of iron. And then a little bit about the creators, John Byrne, Chris Claremont. Oh, I was going to say, why Byrne taking top billing? It's because they're doing it in alphabetical order. And then here we have the classic logo of Iron Fist, the omnibus, the piece down here by Byrne, which I believe this is what they're using for the standard edition cover. Iron Fist, Danny Rand, The Early Years, Claremont, Mensch, Isabella, Byrne, Nebres, and Hama. And then the Iron Fist tattoo. Now, you may be asking, why is it saying Iron Fist Danny Rand? Well, in the modern age of Marvel, in the 616 universe, we do have somebody else playing the role of Iron Fist. Who knows for how long? You know how legacy characters are. Okay, we are going to crack this book open. I'm going to give you the pitch, who Iron Fist is, show off this beautiful artwork. I am going to compare it to the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu Omnibus Volume 2, just some of the internal artwork, but I'll put the timestamps in the description of the video if you want to skip to that, the comparison and the build of this book. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's go ahead and crack this omnibus open. We have some black end sheets here. Iron Fist Omnibus, what it collects, and the creators that take the top billing. This piece, again, by John Byrne. And then the people behind the scenes. The legacy content is presented originally as published. Reader discretion is advised. You can show me those kind of warnings or whatever you may call them, as long as the book is intact and complete. Okay, so here's your table of contents. And what's interesting is they're borrowing introductions from the Marvel Masterworks, not just from Marvel Masterworks Iron Fist 1 and 2, but also from the intro to The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu Volume 2, which was written by Claremont. So you have a Roy Thomas introduction here, talking about how he came up with the concept, and then you have the Chris Claremont introduction here, talking about the kismet of working with someone like John Byrne. But just a little bit about the introduction here, which is really interesting because this is a story I've heard a lot, but I just love reading it from Roy Thomas's pencils, typewriter, whenever he wrote this in 2011 with the first masterwork. But he talked about how during this time, they had the Master of Kung Fu series, and then he went to watch a movie, The Five Fingers of Death, and there was this scene where they had the ceremony of the Iron Fist, and because of that scene, it stuck with him, that word, Iron Fist. And he was like, well, we can't call it Iron Fist, we already have an Iron Man. So what ended up happening is he talked to Gil Kane was on board, and then both of them decided, hey, you know what, Marvel Comics can do Iron Fist and Iron Man. They borrowed a lot of their ideas from Bill Everett's 1939 hero, The Amazing Man. And which again, that character borrowed heavily from Lost Horizon, and that's kind of how they came up with the concept, or at least the backstory, the tattoo, and the powers of Danny Rand. And sadly, Bill Everett had passed away right before this book right here, where Iron Fist first started, premiered. So this is dedicated to him at the very end, which we'll look at here in a second. But first, what's collected in here is Marvel Premiere 15 through 25, Iron Fist 1 through 15, Marvel Team Up issues 63 and 64, and the material from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu 10, 18 through 24, 29, 31 through 33, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu Special number 1, and Bizarre Adventures number 25. Alright, what's the pitch? What is this about? Oh, by the way, the book has 952 pages. Well, we start off with the character of Iron Fist talking to himself and about to attack these people. We think he's being attacked by villains, but what it is, it's this trial that he's going through right now in the first issue. And he has a flashback of how all of this really began. So this is the character of Danny Rand, and he starts thinking about his childhood, how it's kind of crazy, but 10 years ago, he came here with his father and mother. So this is Heather and Wendell Rand. They took him on this expedition. He took his family on this expedition, and he was trying to find the mystical city of Kunlun. Now, later on, there's a couple of things that were added, but I'm not going to get into. I'm just kind of giving you the pitch of the first issue. And who is also with him is his business partner, because that's obviously who you take with you. And this is the character of Harold Meacham, sorry. And Harold's not just his business partner, but he reminds you, the reader, that he's also Wendell's best friend. And there's young Danny Rand as a small child about to witness the betrayal when his family slips, or his mom slips. His dad tries to save her, and what happens? The family is betrayed by Harold Meacham, partner and best friend. He lets Wendell fall to his death. Danny has to witness this, and so does Heather, his wife, and she refuses to take his help. She's like, you killed my husband, how dare you? You're not going to get away with this, so he leaves them there. So it goes back to the present day, or I guess present day 1974, where now he is challenged against Shuhu, and this is the Silence. So this is who he has to fight, and we get another little bit of a flashback. Well, what happened? How did he end up here, this little boy with this mom? Well, she sacrifices herself to wolves so her son can escape and run across this bridge while she runs to her death, and lo and behold, he is saved. He is saved, as wolves are shot down by a bunch of arrows, so you don't see it. So that's why I didn't really warn people about that love animals, because you don't really get to see it. It's kind of off panel, but it is heavily implied that they killed some wolves to save this small child. And they end up taking him to Kunlun. So he has arrived now at Kunlun. Now, what is Kunlun, though? Well, before we talk about it, we talk about the present, where he defeats what turns out to be a giant robot, and now he's allowed to have immortality. He's allowed to have the eternal life and death. By the way, all the letter pages are in here. If the comic had a letter page, that's in here. That's something you're not going to get in the Masterworks nor in the Epic collection. So if you're a big fan of complete collections, this might be the route to go. So then we go to the Marvel Premiere issue number 16, where now he is walking around, and I think this is Upper Manhattan. Chris Claremont had an introduction there talking about how different times were back then. And then we go back to when he was in Kunlun, when Yuti, this is the hooded ruler of Kunlun, takes him in and gives him his own apprentice. This is his mentor, right? Or no, he becomes an apprentice and makes him an apprentice to this guy right here. This is Lei Kung. He's known as the Thunderer, and he's going to be Danny Rand's mentor. You know, they shave his head and they train him in the way of the martial arts. Eventually, you get to find out how he defeats a dragon. This is Xiao Lao, and earns the Iron Fist. So he has the ability to focus all his energy and make his fist hit like iron. And that's his power. So what's he doing in New York City? Well, he asks UT if he can go back and get revenge, because he is now 19 years old. 10 years have passed. And the years have been kind to Randy. Like, he is freaking ridiculously cut for a 19-year-old, but I guess that's what you get when all you do is think about vengeance and, you know, beating your fist up against something. Because we are going to see Harold here in a little bit. But that's what this is. He's in New York, and now he's looking for Harold, the man that betrayed his father, the man that he holds responsible for, you know, where he is now. And of course, he blames him for the death of his mother, too. What's really interesting about this series is that we went from Roy Thomas and Gil Kane, like I mentioned, starting the series, and then they had to leave. So the second issue, the second appearance of Iron Fist, the story continues, but now it's Len Wein and Dick Giordano doing the inks, but we have the art of Larry Hama. Now, Larry Hama sticks around for a few issues, but we have Doug Mensch. After Doug Mensch, Tony Isabella takes over the book, and it seems like nobody's stuck with the book, but it's still an ongoing story. So this is the part where he tries to get revenge here on the character of Harold Meacham, and of course he has to go through all his goons. There's a little bit of a flashback again to Kunlun, kind of explaining who the character is, and then we see Harold Meacham. In the years have not been kind to this guy. Like, it's really weird. Like, only 10 years have passed since that betrayal, and he looks rough. Well, he explains what ended up happening to him. Now, before Danny could get his revenge, a ninja appears out of nowhere and takes his revenge. Now, whether Danny or not was going to kill him, you get the idea that he was not going to kill him. But what happens is Harold's daughter walks in. This is Joy Meacham, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you killed my father." So Danny is like, "No, I didn't. But who the hell is that ninja?" So that takes us on another journey where he ends up meeting Colleen Wing and her father, Professor Wing, who, Colleen, if you probably have been reading comics for a while, or even if you haven't, you've heard of Colleen because, you know, she's a big part of the Daughters of the Dragon. And of course, when I say Daughters of the Dragon, you can't help but think of the other main character that also makes her first appearance here, and that is Misty Knight. Now, what's really cool about this omnibus, besides the letter pages and the oversized format, is the addition of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu issues that are interwoven in here in between the Marvel Premiere issues and issues of Iron Fist. And it's done really well. Like, it tells you at the very beginning when these stories were originally published. So, for example, if you go back to the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, especially it came out in the summer of 74, even though the stories here, you know, go from May to November, but they didn't want to break up that particular story arc, so they decided to collect it here. And I like when they put a lot of thought into that. But immediately after that is the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, number 10. So in here, you get this story that kind of interconnects the characters of Shang-Chi. Ever since the movie, that's what I called him. All these years I've been calling him Shang-Chi. And the characters of Danny Rand, of course, and then the Sons of the Tiger. They're disconnected at first, but the stories come together later on. And like I mentioned, the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, issue number 10 is collected in here as well. In between issues of the Marvel Premiere. But then you go back to Marvel Premiere, And you have the battle here with Batrick and his whole legion of supervillains that were hired by Joy to go after, of course, Danny because he holds him responsible. You have the whole mystery of who is this ninja. Man, this issue right here, I remember kicking it, like, this kicks off brutal. This is the appearance of Warhawk right here, and he is just gunning innocent people down. It's just awful, awful beginning right here where this kid is just left orphaned because this guy's just randomly shooting people. And then again, issues of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu in here. Now, the reason this has mature content is because Deadly Hands of Kung Fu was a magazine and it wasn't like they weren't held down by the comics code. You know how the early years of comics, or whenever you see reprints, there was a comics code that they had to follow, the comic books did. And I'm going to come back to this page. This is one of the pages I'm actually comparing to the Deadly Hands Omnibus. Well, what does that mean? Well, mainly it's violence. But in this in this case here, there is some nudity. And there is a little bit of, like, sexual content in here. Nothing gratuitous, right? But, you know, it's definitely there. And I just wanted to clarify why it states that this has mature content. Because those magazines did not have this right there. So we go back to Marvel Premiere. And eventually, the character grew so big, not physically, but he got so popular that Marvel greenlit, and finally Iron Fist and Iron Man meet. That Marvel finally let him have his own ongoing series. So, issue number 1 by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. Now, if you've read X-Men, you are probably familiar with those two characters. And what's really interesting about this is that in this run, this really has both of them working together for the first time. It's also the first time both of them work together on X-Men, because this predates issue 108 of Uncanny X-Men, where the X-Men show up in issue number 15 here, the last issue. Now, Claremont likes to play the long game, as we all know. And one of the things he does, this is, by the way, another introduction. This is from the Iron Fist introduction, volume 2 of the Masterworks by Bruce Canwell. What Claremont likes to do is play the long game. So he introduces us to the concept of this man that's going around, and he's got a tattoo very similar to the one that Danny Rand has on his chest. Later on, it is revealed who he is. However, the title was canceled before he could have that revelation. So what he does is he ends up taking his stories over to the Marvel team-up, which him and John Byrne were working on, fortunately enough, for a few months before both of them officially worked together on Uncanny X-Men. So the stories here, again, in between issues, are where they put some material from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Pretty much if it featured the character of Danny Rand, Iron Fist, or the Daughters of the Dragon. There's a whole story about his love there named Jade. But in the main series here, he starts developing a relationship with another young lady, and that is that young lady right there, Misty Knight. As a matter of fact, issue number 64, I want to say, is the first interracial kiss, at least in Marvel Comics. It might be in comics in general. And that's issue 64 of the Marvel Team-Up book. But one thing you probably notice is the white tiger. So yeah, in the Deadly Hands, there's all... If you were a martial artist during this time, or you were introduced as a martial artist, or one of the creators introduced you sort of as a martial artist, like Jack of Hearts, you were going to be in the Deadly Hands, or in the Kung Fu magazine. But there's this big story arc that takes him all the way from London, back to New York, back to Kunlun, Betrayal, and the Wrecking Crew gets involved. The ladies get kidnapped. It's got beautiful artwork here by John Byrne. But sadly, the series got canceled, even with the first appearance of the character known as Sabretooth. Now, this is Sabretooth long before Sabretooth was Sabretooth, right? Long before he had ties to... I always love this his little cameo here in issue number 13. Takes him up to Canada to fight Sabretooth. But what I was saying is, this is before Sabretooth became this character that, you know, became the arch nemesis of Wolverine, that swore an oath. It had this, like, just hatred, pure hatred for Wolverine. And it's just this kind of goon right here that was hired, and Danny had to take him down. Again, the letter pages, and then the final issue here. So sadly, the series was canceled. And luckily for John Byrne and Chris Claremont and the readers, the story continued in the pages of Marvel Team Up again, the letter pages, including the final one. And that's where the Steel Serpent story wraps up. Now, as I mentioned, this is also historically known, or issue number 64 is, for having this particular moment there. Now, also collected in here are these issues, and there's some nudity here, and my goodness, the way I did not talk enough about, so much to talk about. Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, man, I just wanted to come back to this. I did not talk enough about the art. Rudy Nebres does a lot of the artwork, collaborating with Chris Claremont in the Deadly Hands, but then eventually it's Marshall Rogers that comes in, and both Rudy and Marshall draw these ladies so gorgeous. Like, it looks so good in black and white. If you've never had a chance to read The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, and this is your first time looking at it, this is what the artwork looks like as far as like the black and white and what's to kind of be expected. They were taking a lot of the artwork and shipping it over to the Philippines. That's where Rudy was drawing, and then of course they were shipping the art back. And Claremont even mentions, if we were lucky to get the artwork back. And there's just some gorgeous pieces of art. So this contains the Daughters of the Dragon story that doesn't really feature the character of Danny Rand in it. And then let's welcome everybody back that didn't want any spoilers. So here are the extras. You have the Marvel Premiere house ads. The Kung Fu craze was hot back then during this time. Original page art. Preliminary sketch there by Gil Kane. Gil Kane did a lot of the covers. It was really rare for like somebody else to come in, especially at the beginning. This is the Iron Fist original cover art right here of issue number 4. Page art right there by John Byrne and Dan Atkins. Dave Cockrum doing that cover to issue number 15. Dan Green inking John Byrne. Oh my goodness. So good. And then this is the reverse side of an original page. I love when artists did this and somebody's lucky enough to own that. My goodness. Oh, I'm sorry. And then these two pieces right here. Pat Broderick and Marshall Rogers to the right. And cover art for Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Marvel Tells. This is again reprints. And this is the Deadly Hands, Daughters of the Dragon's Deadly Hands special, which is just a reprint. And then the trade paperback of The Fury of Iron Fist. The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu Omnibus, the modern, or the standard edition cover. And then the logo right there. So again, the book has 952 pages. Let's look at the eye. So it is sewn binding, and it's a good size eye. We've seen bigger, though, and we've also seen a lot smaller. This one printed at the iMac printer, and this is kind of what to expect here from the spread pages. But let's go towards, I was trying to find some early examples, but I forgot they were using a lot of splash pages. But this is kind of what it looks like. You do get minimal gutter loss. As a matter of fact, before we compare it, I wanted to talk about the paper stock. The paper stock they're using here it's a little bit thinner than what I've seen the Mega Print use, and I've been just reading those books. They're the ones that print the Marvel books. So there is a little bit of bleed through happening, mainly on the white pages. You probably saw it when I was looking through the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, or anytime there's lighter colors. But it didn't, honestly, from the issues that I read, it really didn't distract me from it. But I know it bothers some people, but I wanted to point that out, that there is just a little bit of bleed through. And let's look at the actual, like white pages. You can kind of see some of the frames coming from the opposite side. Now, I want to compare it to the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu Omnibus, particularly one page. And that comes from the issue of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, number 23. The first thing I wanted to do was compare the paper stock, where, especially with these white pages here, to see the kind of bleed through that I was talking about. So for example, you see a little bit of art right here bleeding through from the opposite page. And over here, you do, but not as much as you do over there. but it's a slight change. One of the other things I noticed is that they don't have the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu nor the date up at the top, which they did throughout the entire omnibus here. But the other thing I'm wondering is how they did this. So this is what I wanted to compare to the spread page here. And that is in page, I guess it would be 384. Yeah, right here. So it looks like the art might be just a little bit bigger in this version over here in the new omnibus compared to this. But what I wanted to focus on was the gutter loss, which happens in both of the books. I'll be honest, it's just a little bit better in this one here. This is printed at the Donley printer too, the Deadly Hands, and this is printed at the iMac printer. But yeah, just a little bit. I mean, it's not much better, but it's just a little bit better than the gutter loss over here. But that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if you plan on picking it up, if you already have the Epic Collections or the two Masterworks, and you have the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu and you don't need the extra stuff in here, or if you've never read it and you're excited to read the early adventures of Danny Rand. So, any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.